A disappointing 5-7 season saw Florida State's 36-year bowl streak end. But can the Seminoles turn things around in 2019? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
Year one of the Willie Taggart era in Tallahassee was an absolute disaster. Fresh off a 7-6 season, Seminole fans did not have sky-high expectations going into 2018, but the last thing they expected was to go 5-7. But year two of the Willie Taggart era will be much different. You will see a much improved Seminole team, especially with 16 returning starters and a very deep roster. They opened the season against Boise State in Jacksonville, a very intriguing matchup, and as we all know, the Boise State Broncos are a group of 5 team that you never want to take for granted. They have had so much success against these Power 5 opponents, pretty much dating back all the way back to 2007 when they upset Oklahoma in that Fiesta Bowl. They did that and have never looked back. The good thing for Florida State, though, is that Boise State loses 2 of their key offensive playmakers in Brett Rippon, their quarterback, and Alex Madison, their star running back. With that, Boise State's defense is going to be the strength of the Broncos, at least early on in the season. That could pose a problem for their offense, for Florida State's offense, with James Blackman and Cam Akers. But I think in the end, Florida State, with this game being in Jacksonville, will have a bit of a home field advantage, and they will get the win over the Broncos. They will start the season 2-0 because they will take care of Louisiana Monroe before they kick off ACC play in Week 3 against Virginia. Now, this is a very tricky game, and Virginia is a team that no one should overlook this season in the ACC Coastal Division. They nearly won it last year, and what Bronco Mendenhall is doing with his Cavaliers team is pretty much unbelievable. It really is shocking, the quick turnaround that he has had with the Cavaliers. They are led by Bryce Perkins at quarterback, a guy that no one should take for granted. Not only can he throw the ball, but he's extremely dangerous on the ground as well. A very talented dual-threat quarterback. And Virginia, believe it or not, will have one of the best defenses in the entire nation, led by their senior cornerback, Bryce Hall. They have 6 returning starters on offense, 8 returning starters on defense. Blackman is just a sophomore going into this season, so whether or not he has success against such a strong Virginia defense, that's going to be the key to whether or not Florida State wins this game. I don't think the Seminoles are going to have enough to beat the Cavaliers, especially with this game being on the road, and Florida State takes their first loss of the season. They come back home to face off against Louisville, a team that Florida State narrowly beat last year. Louisville should have won that game. But for some reason, they had the game iced. They continued to throw the ball, ended up throwing an interception to the Seminoles, and of course that resulted in a last-second touchdown. Florida State won that game 28-24. This year, Florida State will win this game by a bigger margin. Florida State, as I mentioned, much more improved, especially on the defensive side of the ball as well. Last year, they allowed 31.5 points per game, but the linebacking core going to be the strength for the Seminoles. Hamza Nazaruddin is the leading tackler from last season. He returns to get paired up with Dontavius Jackson, that linebacking core that will be so difficult for any offense to go up against. And Stanford Samuels and Asante Samuel will be the keys in the secondary. So this Louisville team under new management with Scott Satterfield and a quarterback that I'm not very impressed with in Juwan Pass is going to have a very difficult time on the road against the Seminoles. Florida State picks up their first ACC win of the season. They are 3-1 on the year. They're just 2 wins away from matching last year's win total. They remain at home against North Carolina State, and this is a very intriguing game because North Carolina State loses their star quarterback in Ryan Finley. Now, I know last year I wasn't too high on the Wolfpack because of the amount of star power they lost on the defensive side of the ball. This year, it's quite the opposite. The defensive side of the ball is going to be the key for North Carolina State. Can they replace the big-time pieces on the offensive side of the ball? Florida State gets a big-time win at home against North Carolina State, talent-wise, depth-wise, offensively, especially with Florida State having James Blackman or Alex Hornibrook under center. I believe it will be Blackman. I think he's the best man for the job. And Tamarion Terry, who had 744 yards and 8 touchdowns as a freshman last year, they get a big win over the Wolfpack. And they are now 4-1 going into their bye week against Clemson. And I don't mean to kind of bypass this game, but this will be a loss against the Tigers. Even though they're coming off a week of rest, it is in Death Valley, and they are going up against a team that beat the Seminoles 59-10 last year. One of the most embarrassing losses in Florida State history. Clemson is also led by the best quarterback in the nation in Trevor Lawrence, one of the best running backs in the ACC in Travis Etienne, and probably the best wide receiving core in the entire nation with Armani Rogers, T. Higgins, and Justin Ross. The defense, yes, they lost a lot of star power to the NFL, but Dabo Swinney knows how to continue to breed talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Florida State, regardless of how much talent they have this year, regardless of how much they improve, will not have enough to defeat Clemson, especially in Death Valley. They come over here midway through October on the road against Wake Forest, a team. This is a game that really is a trap game for Florida State. They could be dealing with a bit of a Clemson hangover, especially if the game is as bad as it was last year. I do not expect that. Even though it is in Death Valley, I expect them to put up a better fight than they did last year in Tallahassee. But this Wake Forest team is no team to slouch on. Dave Clawson does a phenomenal job, has been doing a phenomenal job with the Demon Deacons. They have Jamie Newman coming back at quarterback, and a team that all around is pretty much, to me, mediocre. That's the way I want to put it. They're not elite, but they're not bad, and they should be another bowl team. They're good enough, though, to beat Florida State. However, Florida State, by this point in the season, Willie Taggart's not going to let this team have that Clemson hangover. They go on the road and get a huge win against the Demon Deacons. If they were to fall in this game, you could see a downward spiral for Florida State where they could potentially fail to get to bowl eligibility or maybe just barely get there at 6 wins because the schedule gets much tougher after this Wake Forest game. They have Syracuse and Miami at home, which will benefit them greatly. But Syracuse, a team that won 10 games last year and will continue to thrive. Miami, a new head coach, but if they can get that quarterback situation worked out, they're going to be a major threat in the Coastal. On the road against a solid Boston College team, and then on the road at Florida. So if they fail to win this Wake Forest game, it's going to spell a lot of trouble for the Florida State football program. They come back home to Syracuse after a key win against Wake Forest, and I am predicting a loss to the Orange. Now, before everybody freaks out, you have to hear me out. Last year, Syracuse won at the Carrier Dome 30-7 over Florida State. 2 years ago, Syracuse finished the year 4-8, but narrowly lost to Florida State 27-24 in Tallahassee. This Syracuse team, despite losing Eric Dungy at quarterback, is still going to be extremely solid and very well could win 8 or 9 games in 2019. Tommy DeVito has experience at the quarterback position. He fills in for Dungy, and this Syracuse defense is scary good. Dino Baber is no more as an offensive coach, but this defense returns a lot of starters, and I think they're going to be able to come in here, shut down James Blackman, shut down Cam Akers, and they're going to get a huge win on the road. Florida State loses a home game against the Orange, and that's going to be really, really unfortunate for Florida State. But the bright side is that they have a major rivalry game coming up the week after. So if they are not hungover after the Syracuse loss, if they can get their mind in the right place, and that could be another contributing factor to why they maybe lose the Syracuse game. They're looking ahead to this Miami game, a rivalry renewed in a sense. Yes, the Florida State Miami have bad blood, and they've had bad blood in the past, but this rivalry has not meant much in a long time, in my opinion. Manny Diaz and Willie Taggart are going to make this rivalry mean something again. It's going to mean something big in 2019. This game being hosted in Tallahassee last year, Florida State blowing a 27-7 lead against the Hurricanes before losing 28-27. While Miami does bring in Dan Enos as offensive coordinator, while they do bring in Manny Diaz as their head coach, if they can get Tate Martell rolling, Miami's going to be extremely tough to beat. But Florida State will have enough to beat Miami in Tallahassee. I'm predicting a huge win for Florida State at home to kick off things in November. This is a Miami team that I am extremely impressed with and have high hopes for, but I think Willie Taggart knows the importance of this game, and if Florida State narrowly lost to Miami last year on the road, I think they can take care of business at home this year. They get a win over the Hurricanes, and they get a win over Boston College on the road. And this is a Boston College team that's kind of flipped the script, kind of like I mentioned with North Carolina State. Usually they are known for their defense under Steve Adazio. This year is going to be quite the opposite. They return a lot more starters on the offensive side of the ball than they do defensively. They're going to be led by a veteran quarterback in Anthony Brown and a very solid running back in A.J. Dillon, who is a threat to any team that he goes up against. Even though this game is on the road, I think Florida State's defense going up against a much improved Boston College offense is going to be enough. I mentioned how strong this linebacking core and this secondary can be for Florida State. This is where it's going to play a major role for them. They get a key win over the Eagles on the road. Of course, beat Alabama State right after that. A bye week before another rivalry game on the road against Florida, and they fall to the Gators in this one. A Dan Mullen-led team that won 10 games last year, annihilated Michigan in the Peach Bowl, and could possibly make a run at the SEC title game if they can get past Georgia. This is a Florida team that I think is going to be even better than they were last year when they beat Florida State 41-14, and also had more yards than them by a long shot. 536 yards of offense for the Gators last year compared to Florida State's 293. With this game being in the swamp, even though Florida State's going to show drastic signs of improvement, I do not see any way that they go on the road to defeat this Dan Mullen-led team on their home turf. So Florida State goes from a 5-7 season to an 8-4 season. That is a 3-game improvement. They will go to a solid bowl game, will finish fairly high, fairly respectable in the ACC Atlantic standings, and everybody can kind of back off of Willie Taggart and let him do his thing. It was a bad year 1, but year 2, you're going to see some major improvements and maybe even bigger things in year 3. But the Florida State Seminoles finishing the 2019 campaign with an 8-4 season, which if I were a Seminole fan, I would be thrilled with after the events that transpired last season. So guys, as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time here on The Gridiron Expert.